Fashion points are an infinite source of inspiration, which is the reason why I can't contain my excitement about this next guest and interior. Karina Lowe's dream was to live in a fashion museum, taking inspiration from her favorite fashion museum exhibitions, like the famous Alexandra McQueen exhibit at the Met Museum in New York. The Milner Fashion House is a treat and an eclectic mix of antique furniture, African collectibles, books, and more. Colourful fashion dominates the interior design as curated by resident fashion designer Karina Lowe in collaboration with Descript Architects. I can't wait to chat to them both. This home displays traits of grace and chemistry, brought to life by its architecture and poised lines between interior design and fashion. Here to chat to us about the architecture is Adriaan Badenhorst of Descript Architects. Welcome, Adriaan.
Hello.
Adriaan, let's talk firstly about the history of the house, because that's very important, you know, when designing the exterior.
Sure.
Tell us about that.
It was a house, from what we can best gather, it was built around 1970. So it was a typical house in some senses. So it was geared towards formalization of living spaces. Really, it wasn't really to access the outside or something like that.
Right. Now, thinking about you know, what it looked like before and what the client brief was,
Yes.
what did she, you know, want to change and do?
Well, my design approach is really, you could say it's phenomenologist, in a sense that I tend to incorporate the subject into the experience. So the layout would be closer to what I would call Japanese approach. So that we give weight to the void and lightness to the mass. Where the balance of the outside and the inside, the mass and the void, they're both equally important.
Yeah.
So you don't walk in here and see a plan, you see a bunch of experiences.
Right. I'm always very inspired by Japanese everything. And that explains why I love this house.
Thank you. Yeah.
Coming, you know, kind of deepening into that style,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yes.
influence that you've done to create this architecture. You've described it as brutalist. Tell us why and what components of it are.
Yes, you see, if you look structurally at any movement, architecture isn't historical in a sense that we all come together and we decide this is where we're moving. There's some explanation, exploratory approaches that are consistent through the discipline of architecture in a certain time. So if I say brutalist, that would mean in the sense of finishing and choice of materials and stuff like that. So brutalist in the sense that there's nothing on the building that doesn't need to be on the building. And maybe just to overstate, the obvious is that this house used to be plastered.
Right.
So it used to be white. So I'm fine with white. Karina's fine with white. So we used colors that can either be painted or should fall in the range between black and white. And concrete is just perfect for that. Where we chose to use steel, also in the brutalist sense, not the painted black, is what we did is we paint the antioxidant paint, the anti-corrosive paint, the red paint, and we left it at that. So what would be a pure functional decision ended up being the final decisions.
Absolutely, and I'm quite inspired by the idea that choosing minimalism and function can be an aesthetic in itself. But we can continue chatting just now.
Absolutely. Thank you.
This home displays traits of grace and chemistry brought to life by its architecture. Here to chat to us about the architecture is Adriaan Badenhorst. Now, thinking about all the architectural details, kind of like the necessities and the unnecessities, the removing and the adding, what considerations have you made to kind of complement and can bring the outside in and complement the interior?
I think it's in terms of the basic approach to the house, it's being honest about the structure. So, and there was an honesty in the original color of the house, which was white. So there was a decision made for a color palette: wood, white, black, and grey, and concrete. The interior in places, there was a thematic choice. It's limited, and that makes it strong. I think that a similar decision was made to keep a room black and another one white, and everything in between. And I think where we took away walls, where we took away the boundaries, is there where we kind of mixed it up.
Adriaan, it's been a great pleasure chatting to you. We've learned so much about mass, void, deboundarification, so thank you so much.
Pleasure, Pilani.
Well, this having been a collaboration between you and Karina, I think it's time for me to go chat with her. I'll go let myself in.
Hello, Karina.
How are you?
Great, and you?
Oh, fantastic. I can't wait to actually share this house with everyone.
I would love to share it.
Oh, fantastic. Karina, to the question and the moment that everyone's been waiting for. Please unpack to us the inspiration where you drew it from to create this wonderful interior.
The inspiration for this house stems from my love of fashion. Ever since I can remember, I've collected objects, art, fabrics, textures. Anything I find inspiring, I collect. And this house literally spills over with everything I've collected throughout the years.
And in designing it then, was your aim to kind of create a space for those things to live, to be brought to life?
Yes. One of my dreams is to live in a fashion museum. I love visiting fashion museums. I love looking at fashion history. And I wanted to share that with everybody. That's why I've got everything I've collected on display. A big role for me as well with this house is to educate people about fashion and the value of fashion. I was a fashion lecturer years ago, and somehow that educational aspect always sticks with me. I love to tell people about South African fibers, other South African designers, other artists, and this space gives me a platform to do that.
So it does. It's such a beautiful canvas and a bedrock for that. Now, in terms of these books, collectibles, items that you've brought into the space, that, you know, kind of an eclectic mix of accessories, what are they, from the furniture pieces to the smalls?
Ooh, there's so many. I have so many favorite pieces. When it comes to furniture, I've got a German workbench that I just absolutely adore. It was the strangest thing. When I saw it in the antique store, I fell literally in love with that piece, which sounds crazy because you can't be in love with furniture, but that was the case with this piece. I've got quite a selection of fabrics, of course. I'm a fashion designer, so I would have. Then trips I've taken to the Ivory Coast, for example, inspired me to buy a lot of Ivorian masks and beads and African woven textiles. Books, of course, anything on fashion history, art history. I'm always collecting that.
Yeah. Outside of the African aesthetics and some of the pieces you have in the house, I believe there's also some inspiration from Japanese culture, maybe in your fittings and finishes?
That's a very interesting thing to mention. I think that's where Adrian and I, our design thinking is similar, isn't that Japanese aesthetic. One of my favorite fashion brands is Rei Kawakubo. And her minimalist, all black, severe style, you can really see this going through the architecture, the finishes on the walls. It's that sense of practical minimalism that provides a blank canvas for this burst of color, essentially.
Outside of that minimalist approach, which is kind of like keeping things simple and making sure things stand out, there's also a sense of kind of sustainability that you've brought into the house in keeping old and new elements. Walk us through what those elements are.
It was very important for me to retain the historical history of the house. So we kept, for example, all the parquet flooring, the wooden flooring. The architect was instructed to sort of frame the old with something new, which is really also, again, what fashion is all about. Fashion is never about what happened just in history, what is happening today or the future. It's all of those things combined. That's what makes fashion fashion and not clothing.
And there's also like playfulness that's coming out of the clothes into almost the interior decorating, where you see layers and textures, playing out in the bedrooms, which we'll continue chatting about in just a bit.
Great.
If you've just joined us, I still have with me Karina Lowe, who's created this beautiful home for herself that's inspired by fashion. What I love is that you've kind of trickled fashion across the corridors all the way into the bedrooms, almost like leading into an idea. Now I'd like us to follow that idea and land up in the bedroom spaces. Walk us through all the things that you've selected there, from like your wall finishes to your furniture, and then we'll come to the patterns in the bedding.
One of my favorite rooms are the garden room. It's open, it's airy. Adrian did such a magnificent job with that room. The angular lines and the concrete just makes it really the modern piece of this house. And I wanted to, because it's such a clean, minimalist space, it provided a perfect canvas for me to bring in one of my favorite inspirations, and that is nature in general. Beautiful flowers, textures. I just always love the fact that when you get stuck and you don't have ideas, you only have to look at a tree or a flower, to see how nature goes grand in scale or repeats certain elements. It's so inspiring, and that's what I applied to that specific room.
Now, Adriaan also mentioned something about making the rooms quite like exclusive, an exclusive experience to themselves, you know. What elements and furniture choices have you brought into the space to create that experience?
The corner room, there's a few antique furniture pieces that I really love. And flowing onto the balcony, a select choice of all my favorite flowers and succulents that you can enjoy. Whereas the more space black room, you've got your pop of pink provided by all the bougainvillea that contrasts with the black and that complements the interior design. But other than that, it's quite sparse. And again, it's more a space to relax and reflect. And you don't invite in any guests. Like with the corner room, it's open. You want to have a conversation with someone. And I loved layering the different black textures in both bedrooms. You've got sequins, you've got wool, a knit even. You don't often see knitted cushions, but cushion covers, but that's sort of the joy of working from home as well, and having my studio here is playing around with offcuts and everything.
Now, everything here has such a beautiful integration of lifestyle elements, and I think it's a job well done. And of course, fashion does not live outside of lifestyle, so
No,
that's great. Thank you, Karina.
Thank you.